Welcome back to Proof or Potion, the health and wellness podcast where we break down the science behind holistic health claims to figure out if they're actually backed by research or if they're just intriguing ancient tales with modern viral fairy dust.
Each week, we dive into one human clinical trial or sometimes a larger systematic review or meta-analysis of multiple human clinical trials. And we ask the big question, is it proof or is it potion?
Today, we're talking about saffron, specifically a patented saffron extract, yes, called Affron, and whether Affron can really improve mood in adults with mild low mood. We're trying to find out, is saffron a natural mood booster or just a very expensive spice?
Okay, Keely. So I've been hearing a lot about saffron for anxiety, depression, and even sleep. And I keep seeing it hyped as nature's Prozac.
Yeah, same. And as a doctor and a researcher, I totally get why people are curious about it. It sounds amazing, a natural spice that's as good as an SSRI without the side effects. But as always, we're trying to figure out, does the science actually support the hype? So let's start with a little background. Saffron comes from the flower Crocus sativus. The saffron threads that you see in cooking, those thin red threads, are actually stigmas in the center of this beautiful purple flower. They're very vibrant. They're hand harvested early in the morning before they lose potency, usually around the months of October to November in these drier climates. And each flower only has a few of these stigmas, so you need to harvest a lot of them, like 100,000, which is why saffron can be so expensive.
Traditionally, saffron has been used in Persian and Ayurvedic medicine for mood, sleep, digestion, even PMS. But the supplement we're looking at today, Affron, which is trademarked, isn't just a collected saffron threads ground up.
Right. Affron is what we call a standardized patented extract. In the natural products world. That means the company, Pharmactive Biotech, no affiliation whatsoever, developed a very specific extraction process to make sure that every capsule contains the same concentration of the active compounds. They confirm this with a special chemistry fingerprint, we call it, that identifies these compounds. The big ones in saffron are crocin and saffronol, which are thought to influence neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and also calm inflammation in the brain and work as antioxidants.
And with patented botanicals like this, consistency is the key. If you buy saffron spice at the store, one batch could be really potent and another could be weak. So a patented extract lets researchers actually test a more reproducible product.
Exactly. So we love just the do it yourself, but also it's nice to have something reproducible. So the catch is also because it's patented, the company owns the rights and has a financial stake in proving that it works. This isn't automatically bad. We'll talk about it later. Most pharmaceutical trials are also funded by drug companies, and we all know there's a, whole conversation around that, but it is something to keep in mind.
Yeah. All right. So let's break down this study. It's called An Examination into the Effects of a Saffron Extract, Affron, on Mood and General Well-Being in Adults Experiencing Low Mood.
So the study was conducted in Australia by what we call a contract research organization, or a CRO. It was published in the journal Nutrients in 2025, so it's a pretty new study. It was funded by Pharmactive Biotech, the makers of Affron. They paid the CRO, or research group, to run the trial.
It was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled. Neither the participants nor the researchers knew who got saffron versus the placebo until the very end of the study, that's what it kind of means, double-blinded, right?
Yep. Adults who reported mild low mood, so not diagnosed as major depressive disorder or diagnosed with any other mental health condition. They were generally healthy, but they had enough subclinical symptoms of depression. So this is really important. They weren't treating moderate or severe or even mild clinical depression, just kind of everyday low mood.
So they split these individuals into two groups. One group got 28 milligrams per day of the Affron saffron extract. They were told to take one dose of 14 milligrams of saffron twice per day with with or without food. 28 milligrams is a standard dose that has been used in most of the 10 other Affron clinical trials to date. The other group got a nearly identical placebo. So basically, it's a pretty solid study design, right? Gold standard in terms of the dose given, in terms of randomization, blinding, frequency of evaluation of mood scores, yada, yada.
Exactly. Yeah. Great study. So, what did they find?
What they find.
Time for the results. Does saffron help with low mood? At 4 weeks, the Saffron group showed significant benefit in DAS-21 depression scores, dropping them an average from 22 points on that scale down to 13 after 4 weeks. Interestingly, the placebo group also showed nearly identical results at 4 weeks, around that 22 to 13.
Okay, that's interesting. But what about 8 weeks? So a little further out.
The improvements with the placebo were still there at 8 weeks, but they kind of leveled off and plateaued around 13 and didn't continue improving at all until the 12 weeks. The saffron extract, however, continued showing slow improvements all the way up until the 12-week mark, which is when the study ended.
So fascinating, right? So the placebo and the saffron were both effective at reducing depression scores significantly at 4 weeks. But only the saffron group continued showing improvements from the 8 to 12 weeks, right?
Yeah, at 8 and 12 weeks. Yeah.
Crazy. Placebo was the same. So
4 weeks. Yeah.
were there any side effects though?
Only 3% in the saffron group, so that was 3 participants out of 100 who experienced treatment-related abdominal pain, headaches, and one had like skin boils, itchy skin. There was 1% side effects in the placebo group, but the study did not report any major adverse events, so it was well tolerated during those 12 weeks at that dose overall.
Okay, so let's discuss a little more. A decrease above 7 on the DAS-21 was determined to be significant by the authors. These patients had subclinical depression, so we're not going to see these like major drops, right? But we did see a big drop in the first 4 weeks from 22 to 13 on average, and then a continued slow and steady improvement down to around 10 and a half at the 12-week mark, where the placebo stayed around 13. So
Exactly, and that's what's important. This was not a huge dramatic effect, but in this population, this consistent measurable benefit compared to placebo, for low mood, even these small improvements matter, and that trajectory, right, is I think is what's important here.
do you think if the study had been longer, you might have seen more benefit?
Possibly, that's science, right? It's worth pointing out.
Right.
So inflammation and mood are slow to change, especially if the root causes like poor diet, lack of sleep, high stress. If these things are still there, it's definitely going to be a slower progression. And natural interventions often can look modest in trials. We've seen this a lot, but when they're combined with some of these other things, they can really have that much more of an effect.
Okay, so let's circle back to the funding piece of all of this,
Right.
right? So the company
Dun, dun, dun.
paid for the study. Do we trust it?
Yeah, let's talk about that. As a scientist, industry funding is tricky. Companies do put pressure on those research groups to find good results. I've been there, I feel that. But in fairness, if the supplement companies don't fund the studies, who will? Pharma isn't throwing millions at saffron research. So we have to find this balance where we're skeptical but not dismissive. I don't think they're trying to say the placebo worked, right? And when we look at, it's also about looking at the total body of evidence and not just this single study that was funded by that company. I think it's not fair to just rule it out. So, and honestly, if I was a company, I would want my product to actually work and to figure that out through the research. People aren't going to keep buying something if it doesn't work anyway. Like, sure, it could be a one-off, but like, I guess I believe that they have decent intentions sometimes.
Sure. And I mean, this isn't the first study on saffron, right?
No, there's been around 20, probably 20 human clinical trials just on major depressive disorder alone, and not just from Pharmactive. They've actually found collectively that mild to moderate improvements for mild to moderate depression that's better than placebo and equal to or better than SSRIs with less side effects. And that consistency is across different groups. So
Okay, so reassuring, but modest, right? But wasn't this the largest clinical trial in terms of number of participants that's like ever been done on saffron?
yeah, it was.
Okay.
The 200 was new as usually 40 to 80 in prior studies.
Okay, and this was the first one to really look at subclinical depression, right?
Yes, most of the other studies have looked at a clinical diagnosis of depression. So I think that's kind of the novel piece here with this study.
Yeah. So one thing that we've seen in especially with botanicals, right? And I guess we haven't looked at a lot of other general supplements like minerals or nutrients
Yeah.
wise, but with botanicals, we really see that like efficacy goes with like length and time and dose.
Yeah.
So can we kind of like take our study eyes off for a second and like our clinical eyes and like, do you feel like longer term this is going to have more efficacy?
I mean, so far, a lot of studies do 4 to 8 weeks, which may not be enough in this case at 4. We did get
More
improvement.
12. Yeah.
And we did get the most improvement in the
Right.
first 4.
Okay.
But then it continued until 12. And like we saw with the ashwagandha sleep study,
Mhm.
there was improvement before, but it maximized around 8 weeks. And some of those had gone longer. So I think it's just we need the research, right?
Yeah. So maybe like the next study will be that year mark and we can really see.
Yeah, because they were saying most of the Saffron trials to date have been 4 to 8. And now now we've got 12, which there was continued improvement. And then if we could get to a year,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic. And
So I feel like what we're finding consistently across all of the different treatment modalities that we're looking at, we're seeing these like early studies. And we haven't really got like the full data picture yet because we're on like the front edge of seeing these studies. Even if they're a few years old, there hasn't been enough funding, there hasn't been enough interest, there hasn't been enough backing to like get those like longer, more detailed studies. I think it's kind of an interesting trend that we're seeing overall.
And these patented extracts, I think it's worth talking about that there's big pros and cons, right? On the herbalist side of the fence, there's almost like this resistance, this strong resistance to making it more of a drug. And on the clinical practice side, the manufacturer supplement side, they love these patented extracts because there's so much more predictability in terms of safety and efficacy. And we can actually put out some data that is consistent based on having a sole source, like the Affron is grown in Spain. They have a specific process that they use, and then they analyze their product at different stages, usually at the production stage, and then like the final product goes to the manufacturer, and they're responsible for certain things at the production level. But I think we're just going to keep seeing more and more of that.
Yeah.
And there's kind of these two camps of people in the natural space where people want to be food, herbs should be the medicine of the people, and you should be able to just go to your backyard and grow something and make it. After being a scientist and a clinician, I don't want to take a strong stance on this, but I also, in terms of knowing if something is going to be safe and effective, as long as we are ethically caring for these plants and, where we're getting these botanicals from, I think that it's going to go a long way for the research to be able to have standardized extracts of some of these things. So,
yeah. So what do we think? Proof or potion?
Just based on this one study.
Yeah. Based on one study.
Just on this study for mild, low mood, subclinical depression. I would say early proof. This is now the 11th study of this particular product at that dose.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we start to get more certainty about some of these things.
Cool.
Don't go try it without talking to your doctor.
Proof light, I would say.
Proof light.
Yeah, okay. That's how I felt. Proof light.
So we want to know, what do you think? Proof or potion?
Saffron for low mood. Would you try it? Have you tried it?
Yeah.
Tell us what you think.
Share your stories.
Like, comment, or subscribe. If you liked our video today, learning alongside us, we're just here to share what we see. That's all. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye, friends.